Bienvenido aquí, bienvenido aquí, no quiero que vayas tú, no quiero que vengas hoy. Bienvenido aquí, a este lugar de amor, de sueños de ilusión, a este lugar de amor. Bienvenido aquí, si es un lugar de amor, de sueños de ilusión, a este lugar de amor. Bienvenido aquí.
Good morning. Welcome to Chalice Unitarian Universalist Congregation. We are a community of diverse beliefs and experiences, nurturing the liberal religious spirit and united by our desire to grow in love and in service. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your life's journey, you are welcome here. Whether you gather with us every Sunday, once or twice a year, or are with us this morning for the first time, we are glad you are here. I'm Reverend Sharon Wiley, Chalice's minister. Our worship musician this morning is our music director, Tim McKnight. Welcome to this online worship service. Welcome to those of you watching live this morning using Zoom, and welcome to those of you who are watching the recording on our YouTube channel later on. For those of us using Zoom, please notice on your menu that you have a button that says CC Live Transcript. This is Zoom's closed captioning service, and you can click on it to hide the subtitle or to show the subtitle, depending on whether you want it on or off. Also on your menu is the chat button. For those of you who like to use the chat box during the service, which you're welcome to do, and people are saying good morning there now, please be sure that when you post that you've used that little blue drop-down menu to select panelists and attendees. If you only post to panelists, I'm the only one who your message comes to, and I may not see it during the service. And chat is for sharing with everyone. So let's all give ourselves a big hug of hello and welcome. If you share space with someone, give them a hug too. We can forget sometimes. I want to especially welcome those of you who are newcomers at Chalice. Towards the end of the service, I'll post a link in the chat box for adding your name to our email list. Our weekly email is the best way to get information about the many online groups and activities we offer using Zoom. And once you're on our email list, you'll receive information about our monthly gathering for newcomers. Now, let's take a breath together. We begin our service by acknowledging that wherever each of us is watching, if we are in what is now called the United States, then we are on land that has been stolen from Indigenous peoples. Our congregational home in what is now called Escondido is on land that is part of the traditional territories of the 12 bands of the Kumeyaay Nation and the 7 bands of the Payamkushum, also called the Luiseno. Land that is sacred to us now was stolen from people for whom that land is still sacred. In recognition that we are the beneficiaries of a history of colonialism, we have made financial donations in the past year to 2 local Indigenous-led organizations, California Indian Legal Services and the Kumeyaay Degeno Land Conservancy. It is our hope at Chalice to find our way to right relationship with local tribes. Now we light our chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. The flaming chalice was first used during World War II by the Unitarian Service Committee as a symbol of life-saving refuge for people fleeing persecution in Europe. May our chalice flame burn brightly, that all who are seeking may find us. That was beautiful. Our service this morning reflects on the Christian holy day of Easter and the life and death of Jesus. The words of our call to worship come from the Reverend Julia Hamilton with deep appreciation to the poet, E.E. Cummings. It's Easter morning, and I'm here, and you're there. And somewhere between us are flowers, and above us the true blue dream of sky. and underneath us, the illimitable earth, breathing as she always does in cycles of death and rebirth. Everything that is holy, which is everything, stands between me and you. The infinite of all existence, the great happening, is happening all around us. That is to say, my distant friend, life is happening and the sun is rising again over us all. I am a human merely being in these times of pandemic and spring, and the leaping green gathers for one more attempt to remind us that yes is still always an answer ready to be spoken. Let us worship together. Please join in singing. Our Sunday worship is the shared spiritual practice of our community, and we tend to the congregation during this time by honoring our joys and sorrows. If you would like to share a joy or sorrow with the congregation this morning, now is the time for sharing in the chat box. These won't be spoken out loud. If you would like to send me a confidential note about your joy or sorrow, or to make a prayer request, please email me and I'll put my email in the chat box. Our story is called After the Fall, How Humpty Dumpty Got Back Up Again, written and illustrated by Dan Santat. My name is Humpty Dumpty. This was my favorite spot, high up on the wall. I know, it's an odd place for an egg to be, but I loved being close to the birds. Then one day, I fell. I'm sort of famous for that part. Folks called it the Great Fall, which sounds a little grand. It was just an accident, but it changed my life. Fortunately, all the king's men managed to put me back together. Well, most of me. There were some parts that couldn't be healed with bandages and glue. After that day, I became afraid of heights. I was so scared that it kept me from enjoying some of my favorite things. I walked past the wall every day, and I would think about climbing that ladder again. I really missed the birds and being high above the city, but I could never do it because I knew that accidents can happen. I eventually settled for watching the birds from the ground. It wasn't the same, but it was better than nothing. Then one day, an idea flew by. Making planes was harder than I thought. It was easy to get cuts and scratches. But day after day, I kept trying and trying until I got it just right. My plane was perfect and it flew like nothing could stop it. I hadn't felt that happy in a long time. It wasn't the same as being up in the sky with the birds, but it was close enough. Unfortunately, accidents happen. They always do. I almost walked away again, but then I thought about all the time I'd spent working on my plane and all the other things I'd missed. I decided I was going to climb that wall. But the higher I got, the more nervous I felt. I didn't want to admit it. I was terrified. I didn't look up. I didn't look down. I just kept climbing, one step at a time, until I was no longer afraid. Maybe now you won't think of me as that egg who was famous for falling. Hopefully, you'll remember me as the egg who got back up. And learned how to fly.
I know a man, and I just want to talk about him a minute, and maybe you will discover who I'm talking about as I go down the way. Because he was a great one. He just went about serving. He was born in an obscure village.
Yes.
The child of a poor peasant woman. And then he grew up in still another obscure village where he worked as a carpenter until he was 30 years old. Then for 3 years, he just got on his feet and he was an itinerant preacher. And he went about doing some things. He didn't have much. He never wrote a book. never held an office. He never had a family. He never owned a house. He never went to college. He never visited a big city. He never went 200 miles from where he was born. He did none of the usual things that the world would associate with greatness. He had no credentials but himself. He was only when the tide of public opinion turned against him. They called him a rouser. They turned against him. They called him a rabble-rouser. They called him a troublemaker. They said he was an agitator. He practiced civil disobedience. He broke injunctions. And so he was turned over to his enemies and went through the mockery of a trial. And the irony of it all is that his friends turned him over to them. One of his closest friends denied him. Another of his friends turned him over to his enemies. And while he was dying, the people who killed him gambled for his clothing, the only possession that he had in the world. When he was dead, he was buried in a borrowed tomb through the pity of a friend. 19 centuries have come and gone. Today, he stands as the most influential figure that ever entered human history. All the armies that ever marched, all the navies that ever sailed, all parts that ever stood, all kings that ever reigned together, not affected the life of men put together, have not affected the life of man on this earth as much as that one solitary life. His name may be a familiar one, but today I can hear him talking about him. Every now and then somebody says he's King of Kings. And again I can hear somebody saying he's Lord of Lords. Somewhere else I can hear somebody saying, in Christ there is no east nor west. And then they go on and talk about in him there's no north and south, but one great fellowship of love throughout the whole wide world. He didn't have anything. He just went around serving and doing good.
He just went around serving and doing good. Jesus was a radical. So radical that over 2,000 years after his death, his teachings are still radical, still challenging for all of us. He taught that we should love our enemies. Think of the legislators in Georgia who passed a voter suppression law last week, a law that has been called a new version of Jim Crow. Think of the politicians who are working on 361 voter suppression bills across 43 states. In my mind, these are our enemies, enemies of democracy. Jesus tells us to love them, not hate them. Think of those who attacked the Capitol in January. Think of those who might have helped us stop the spread of the coronavirus earlier. Jesus tells us to love them, not hate them. Jesus taught that we should turn the other cheek, responding to violence and threat without retaliation. Jesus taught us to welcome the stranger, feed the hungry, clothe the naked. Think of these teachings as you read in the newspaper the arguments over how we treat people at the border, how we treat people seeking asylum, how we treat homeless people living on our streets. These issues are debated every day. Consider this teaching. But woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now, for you will be hungry. Woe to you who are laughing now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when all speak well of you, for that is what their ancestors did to the false prophets. It's from the book of Luke. This is a teaching about the dangers of seeking worldly satisfaction alone without care for being a good person. Think of our former president, for example, and hear the words again, woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now, for you will be hungry. Woe to you who are laughing now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when all speak well of you, for that is what their ancestors did to the false prophets. This teaching is the antidote to everything our culture tells us we should want: wealth, abundance, public acclaim. Jesus's teachings were radical, so dangerous that he was put to death. As Dr. King described just now, he was only 33 when the tide of public opinion turned against him. They called him a rabble rouser. They called him a troublemaker. They said he was an agitator. He practiced civil disobedience. He broke injunctions. And so he was turned over to his enemies and went through the mockery of a trial. He didn't have anything. He just went around serving and doing good. Radical. The week before Easter is known as Holy Week in the Christian tradition, following the last week of Jesus' life. Holy Week began last Sunday, Palm Sunday, commemorating Jesus' arrival in Jerusalem. There are various traditions associated with the first part of the week, and then Thursday is known as Maundy Thursday, commemorating the Last Supper. Good Friday commemorates the crucifixion and death of Jesus, an unjust death witnessed by crowds. Author Diana Butler Bass noted the connection between Holy Week and the trial that began this week for the murder of George Floyd. She wrote, "A man lies in a street, struggling for life as the authorities usher him to death. Onlookers are horrified, begging for him to be spared, doing their best to help and wanting to render aid, all while knowing that there is nothing that will deter the officials and stop the man from dying. For Christians, this is Holy Week. And during this Holy Week, America has been riveted by the testimony in the trial of Derek Chauvin, the police officer who kneeled on the neck of George Floyd until Mr. Floyd breathed his last." She continues, "I've watched most of the witnesses, from the 9-year-old girl to 61-year-old Charles McMillan, who broke down on the stand. With each tearful testimony, I think of what happened on that street in Minneapolis, as regular people watched heartless authorities while a man died unjustly. And I remember what happened on a street in Jerusalem 2 millennia ago." End quote. Jesus died on a Friday, and because the Jewish Shabbat begins Friday at sundown, Jesus and his followers were Jewish, remember. Because of the need to prepare for Shabbat, Jesus was hurriedly placed in a tomb with the intention from his friends to finish embalming and proper burial ceremonies on Sunday after Shabbat had ended. That is why women came to Jesus' tomb on Sunday morning and were surprised and dismayed to find it empty. As horrible and distressing as that must have been, we can also imagine that it would have seemed like, well, just one more horrible thing, right? After everything that had been happening, violence, injustice, a public death, just another nightmare. Here are things that have happened to us this past week. The trial of Derek Chauvin has begun. For many of us, and I include myself, the trial has brought up painful memories of seeing George Floyd's death on video. For African American people in particular, the trial itself is traumatizing. I think that no matter the verdict, there will be no way to feel that justice has been done because George Floyd is dead. So how can he find justice? Something else this week, Dr. Deborah Birx told CNN that over 400,000 COVID deaths could have been avoided if the Trump administration had taken COVID more seriously. This admission now from someone who served as the White House coronavirus response coordinator is enraging because she was silent and complicit when she might have made a difference. Surely everyone who has lost a loved one to coronavirus this past year felt some combination of anger and grief at her confession. It is a reminder that every day of this pandemic might have been avoided completely had different leadership been in place. A man attacked 2 Capitol Police officers on Friday. The man and one of the officers have died. This attack touches the place in us that is still tender after the January attempted insurrection and unsettles us with the worries that our elected officials may not be safe. A congressional representative from Florida is being investigated for sexual misconduct, including sex trafficking of minors. The accusations are distressing, and for many women, they bring up memories of sexual harassment, especially incidents of being young and receiving unwanted attention from older men, a very common experience. In so many ways, things actually feel like they're better than they have been, right? Things are a lot better. Actually, competent officials are running the government. More and more of us are vaccinated every day. 4 months ago, things were worse. 6 months ago, things were really worse. And yet with just 1 week's worth of news, we are hard-pressed to name any demographic group that is not suffering from traumatizing memories and reminders. We are living in tumultuous times. I know many of you feel disconnected from the Christian celebration of Easter. Though Unitarian Universalists understand Jesus as an important teacher, we are less certain of what to make of the resurrection story. If we believed wholly in Jesus' resurrection, we might not be Unitarian Universalists after all. This is how Unitarian Universalist Sue Andrews describes what happened Easter morning. This depiction comes from the Gospel of Luke. On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were wondering about this, suddenly, 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. In their fright, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground, but the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, he is risen. Remember how he told you while he was still with you in Galilee? The Son of Man must be delivered unto the hands of sinful men, be crucified, and on the third day be raised again. Then they remembered his words. When they came back from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to all the others. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and the others with them who told this to the apostles. But they did not believe the women, because their words seemed to them like nonsense. Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb. Bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves, and he went away, wondering to himself what had happened. There is much in the resurrection story that we would question and examine. But this morning, I invite you to consider what it is to receive hopeful news when you are living in tumultuous times. I feel so much sympathy for the apostles who did not initially believe the women because their words seemed to them like nonsense. I know that feeling of fearing to hope, wanting something to be true, but feeling so beaten down by everything that has happened that you don't want to let yourself believe something good because you don't want the pain of finding out it's not true. Remember how you felt in the days after the November election. Remember how nervous we were in the days leading up to the certification of the election, and rightly so, as it turns out, as that day was marked with violence and death. Remember how you felt when you heard the vaccines were being approved, were becoming available. The morning I went to get my first vaccine dose, as I left the house, my husband called out, "Good luck," because until the shot is in our arms, we can't quite believe it's really going to happen. That some series of events isn't about to take place that will make the vaccine unavailable. I think of those of you who had your appointments canceled because not enough vaccine was available, and the panic and anxiety that brought. The story of Jesus' resurrection, the Christian celebration of Easter, is a reminder that good things are possible, miracles are possible, even when we feel we dare not hope for them. Easter is a reminder that spring follows winter, that rebirth and renewal are not just possible, but are the natural cycle of life, and that our greatest losses and fears can, out of those losses and fears can come transformation. Our story this morning after the fall is an Easter story at its heart, a story of overcoming tragedy and pain, of finding the hope and courage to try again. And then when you least expect it, rebirth into something new, transformation, a fresh start, a new beginning. We all have Easter stories we can tell, times when we have felt lost and broken and have found hope and courage and made our way to something new. Life abounds with stories of rebirth and renewal over and over again. As we continue to make our way through these tumultuous times, I encourage you to remember that possibility is all around us. As I've said before, everything is falling apart, which means that everything is possible. Let's tell each other our stories of renewal after loss. Let's hearten ourselves and each other as we continue to travel this rough road together. You're invited to join in singing. The Sunday offering is an expression of the generosity that makes our congregational life possible. As Buddhist teacher Sharon Salzberg writes, generosity is characterized by the inner quality of letting go or relinquishing, being able to let go, to give up, to renounce, to give generously. These capacities spring from the same source within us. When we practice generosity, we open to all of these liberating qualities simultaneously. Please text your donation to Chalice. If you haven't texted a donation before, know that once you text the amount, the numbers, you'll get a reply with a link to follow to enter your credit card information. If you've already entered this information previously when you've donated, you won't need to enter it again. If your Sunday donation is part of your pledge payment, please be sure to indicate pledge after the dollar amount. And also know that you can make a text donation anytime. It doesn't need to be during the worship service. So the phone number will be on screen in a moment, and I'll also put it in the chat box. Please give generously. Please join me in our words of affirmation. May love be the spirit of this church. May the quest for truth be its sacrament and service be its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, and to help one another in fellowship. This is our aspiration.
There'll be joy in the morning on that day. There'll be joy in the morning on that day. For the daylight will dawn when the darkness is gone. There'll be joy in the morning on that day. There'll be peace and contentment evermore. There'll be peace and contentment evermore. Once more, every heart, every voice will again rejoice. There'll be peace and
One of you told me this week about going back to work in an office full-time starting Monday, and of being frightened about that, even having been vaccinated. It's been so many months and there's so much we still don't know. I can understand that the thought of being in another room with quite a few other people, all breathing the same air, feels nerve-wracking after a year. And I know some of you have been working in offices already for some time, so have been coping with the fears about that for quite a while already. I know parents who are sending children back to in-person school, even though they really don't want to. I know parents who want to send their children back to in-person school, but can't yet. I know people who have begun to have more interactions with other people and are very joyful about that, but also a little overwhelmed and easily tired, and then kind of happy to get back home alone, actually. In a press conference this week, CDC Director Rochelle Walensky said, "We have so much to look forward to, so much promise and potential of where we are, and so much reason for hope. But right now, I'm scared." Her comment is a reflection of the challenges of these difficult times. Millions of people are getting vaccinated every day, and yet there are still people who are dying of COVID. It will be months before everyone who wants the vaccine can get it, and that's just in the United States. Global vaccination is an issue that's going to need increasing attention, in my opinion. So please continue to wear a mask and to be socially distanced when you are out and about, even if you are vaccinated. One of the important reasons to do this is that it encourages other people to wear masks and to stay distanced. We still have a ways to go before this is over. And let's remember that we're all in it together. Please join in singing.
Come thou fount of every blessing, tune our hearts to sing thy grace.
Our closing words come from Reverend Alex Holt. For all those who celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, may this day be another affirmation of divine love and promise. For all those who see the eternal story of new spring and life beginning anew, may you breathe deeply of a season of promise and hope. For all who are experiencing despair or hopelessness this Easter, may you find in the darkness or depression a doorway to light and warmth that offers you freedom. For all of us, together we can do what no one isolated person can do. Rolling the heavy stone aside reminds us we are far more powerful than we ever could be on our own. Our offering of strong hands to help, our prayers made real. Let us begin again to love. You're invited to close our time together by singing the well, and everyone is invited to coffee hour.